You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. So, hello, friends. In this episode, I'm going to introduce you to my guest, Megan Hamm. She's a professionally trained counselor and she works with children and families when families are experiencing challenges, specifically a lot of times due to behavioral conditions. So, what we talk about today in this episode is Megan's experience of being a foster parent and how that personal experience changed how she supports her clients, especially when it comes to what we call trauma. So we talk about how Megan became a foster parent, and we also talk about something that I find very interesting, how it went when she tried to bring her personal experience, having lived this and applied it in her own life, how it went when she tried to bring that personal experience into her professional circles. This is good stuff, kids. So, are you ready? I'm ready. Let's do it. Megan Hamm, welcome to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. Are you ready for a fun chat?
I am. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Oh, you are very welcome. I start all of my conversations asking people what part of the world you call home. So, where are you today? Where do you live?
I am in Mississippi.
Ooh, I love it. All right, very good. I am also in the South, but all the way on the East Coast. I'm in Florida. So,
Okay.
in a second, we're going to start the official interview and the topic of the day. I want to ask one more warm up question because you and I don't know each other. Tell me and the audience that's listening, what is something that you do that you consider self care?
For me, self care is really being outside and walking around outside. Sometimes I like to do it with my shoes off because that's what we did growing up in the country when I was growing up. And sometimes just being able to walk through my grass with my shoes off is definitely self care for me.
That I love that answer. So that is a lot of people have been telling me nature and being outside when I asked that question. Where I live in South Florida, being barefoot in the grass is a risky proposition because we have a lot of fire ants.
Okay.
We have a lot
Yeah.
of fire ants. So people say that, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be outside on the ground with my shoes on. Thank you very much. But all right. So the topic of the day is how a personal experience that you had changed how you approached your work. And specifically, we're talking about your experience in being a foster parent. I'm very excited to talk to you about this today because I think this might, and I don't know, I haven't had this conversation with you yet, but I think it might illustrate something that for me, is what I call the hill I might die on, which is that I think that people who have lived experiences are very valuable and very helpful and sometimes hard to find. So let's start with this as a question about your job and profession. Before you became a foster parent, what was the job and profession that you were doing? Tell us a little bit about what that was at the time.
Well, I'm a licensed professional counselor, and so I work with. I've done in-home services and I've done community-based services. Now I'm in private practice, but I've worked with families honestly throughout my 17 years in the field, the mental health field. I've always worked with families who were in crisis, families who've had children who've had like some challenging behaviors, and so I've always done that work, and that's the work that I continue to do now. So I've been in mental health for about 17 years this year.
All right, very good. So, a mental health counselor. All right. So, let's talk a little bit about the timeline, and I want to understand this. Was your introduction to foster care through your job and through your profession? Like, how did you become aware of it and how did it become something that you were thinking about doing?
Honestly, I had somebody I worked with in 2000 and we worked together in 2009, 2010, and she and I were having a conversation one day. Her daughter was graduating. And I saw a picture and I was like, "Oh, your girls look just like you." And she was like, "Do they really?" And I was like, "Yeah, y'all could be twins." Like she had three girls. They all looked like they could be twins to me, all four of them. And she was like, "Well, they're adopted." And I said, "Adopted?" And she was like, "Yes." And so that was my first time, I think, having a meeting a family who I had known for a couple years at that time, and not even knowing that the kids were had been in foster care and were adopted. Working the work that I've done, one of the jobs I had before was I was helping families get their children out of foster care. So I've
Okay.
always had that experience with foster care on the other end as the professional, as the one working with the parents and working with the foster parents to be able to help the children. And I think that was the first time me having a conversation with somebody whose children that I had known and talked to who were adopted, and I would have never known, because honestly, if I showed you a picture, you would not think that they were her foster kids. And I even asked her, I said, are you related to the mom? Like, there was just a striking image. They all looked like to me. And so having that conversation with her, it was very influential in some things I was working on at the time. And she shared her story that she was a foster and adoptive mom. And I think it came back up to me at that time. And I was like, oh, and at this point I was married, and my husband and I did not have any children.
Okay.
And then I think for me, the pivotal point was I came across I wouldn't say a journal, but I came across something that I had written when I was in the 7th grade. And it was about things that we wanted to do when we grew up. And one of the things I put on there, and I was like, I think I want to help the kids who are already here instead of having more. And for
Okay.
me, that was like, is this something I'm supposed to be doing? And that's when I started looking into the process of becoming a foster parent.
That is a really complex but wonderful story. So, at the time that this happened, you were already deeply involved in supporting families within your community. Were you a
Mhm.
social worker? Is that what we call it? Like, you're a counselor, but were you part of the social work system or
Nope,
not?
I was a counselor. So what would happen is the kids would get taken. Well, the social worker is the one that typically will remove the kids from the home, and I was the one doing counseling for the children and the family
Okay.
after they had been removed from the home.
So you were assigned as a support so you were involved in the system from that point. You were aware of it. You had reached a point in your adulthood where you were married, but you had not yet created your own family, and then you had a friend who gave you a view that you didn't already have of foster care,
Mhm.
and then it tied back to something that you had written when you were for yourself when you were in 7th grade. That's a
In the
beautiful
seventh
story.
grade.
That's a
Uh-huh.
beautiful story. All right. So, how long ago, I think you may have said this, but how long ago was this when you began to have the personal conversation with yourself and then your husband about becoming a foster parent?
That was, see, these dates. So this is 2025, 9. So it had to be about 10 years ago.
10 years
It
ago.
was 10 or 11 years ago that my husband and I had the conversation and decided to go through the process of becoming foster parents.
Okay. So that's a big conversation. That's a big conversation. And I want to ask you about that, but I want to be very clear that I'm not asking this to evaluate what you guys did or how you did or how you made the decision. But in the situation that other people out there that are listening could be in the spot of having a thought like, oh, maybe I want to consider this. Take us through it. What were some of the thoughts and ideas that you guys had as you were having this conversation? Do we want to be a foster parent? Do we want to do this? What's involved? What were the things that you guys were talking about just amongst the two of you then?
I think part of it was for me, with all of those things and conversations I was having, he was not a part of that. So for me, I felt like it was a divine conversation that had been had with me. It had been placed on my life. He wasn't a part of that divine conversation. God spoke to me, not spoke to him. And
Yeah.
so when he and I started talking about it, he really was more so supportive of what I wanted to do, what I felt like at that time that God had called upon my life, which included him because he was my husband, because he is my husband. And his was more like support. And most of the questions that he asked was about like, didn't we think that we could handle it? And he thought about worst case scenarios, and he thought about a lot of stuff that he sees in the media. But he also was comforted in the fact that this is the work that I do,
Okay.
in terms of dealing with children's behaviors. We both love kids. We both were the auntie and uncle house that all the kids wanted to come to. And he felt like, well, we can handle it. And he was more open to it because he knew that I would be there as a support. And so I think that was really the turning point for us. And he was like, okay, I'm willing to learn more about it. And as we started going through the process and learning the classes and stuff, he became more comfortable knowing that he would be able to implement the things as well. And so for us, it was more so, me having a conversation with God, bringing him into it, and him trusting what God had told me, and trusting that I would be there to support him through all the worst case scenarios that he could imagine or that he got from TV and all the media that's out there.
Fair enough. I think that's a really helpful answer. And I want to say thank you very much for sharing that experience. I think that it's one of the things you said is that you guys were having the conversation. You had been having this conversation with yourself and, all of these things. And then he brought in some of what he saw as the worst case scenario types and things. Then you guys could talk about it. And he was open to discussing it. That's you guys probably have very good communication skills because that's a really high level thing to say. Are you open to discussing it as opposed to you got to decide right now and you need to be all in. That was a clue for me. Somebody who also works with families is like, this is somebody who knows how to move a conversation forward.
Yeah.
All right. So at this point, you are a person. You have professional experience in supporting families who are going through this and working with kids who are showing up with behavior stuff in the home and in their lives based on what's happening. You shared with me on the intake form, and that's the purpose of this conversation, that living the experience, going through it as the foster parent, did change how you work with kids in trauma. How quickly did you realize sort of like, oh, wow, being on the inside might be a little different than being on the outside?
For me, it was from the door, because becoming a foster parent, we do all this training and we learn all these things. And I did not realize the amount of information that we did and did not learn because most of it I already knew. Like I was already trauma trained, I was already a trauma professional. And so some of the stuff was like, okay, yeah, I know that. But going into the situation, it had to be, we had our daughter for about, maybe it had to be like 3 or 4 months. Like there were some behaviors here and there, and we were able to deal with them. We handled them. And I was like, I ain't gonna say it was easy peasy, but it wasn't as challenging for me because of my experience. But one of the things that she loved, and I loved, in the beginning about her, was she was so excited for bath time. And we would make it a whole ritual. And so it was, get yourself together for bath time, go in there, do the bubble bath. She would sing songs, it was a whole thing, a whole experience. And about 3 months in, it was time to it was bath time. And she said, I don't want to take a bath. I'm like, oh, what do you mean? So I'm not coaxing her, but we're going through the process. We have to take a bath. And so she got in the tub and she stood in the tub. And I can remember this vividly. And so she's standing in the tub and she just starts screaming and crying and yelling, I'm not taking a bath. I don't want to be in here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to, like, all the things. And I was frozen, because I'm
Right.
like, this is not typical. This is not what we do. This is like, what is it? And so I'm going into my therapy bag. I'm going into my trauma informed bag. And I'm like, okay, so what is the trigger? What is going on? What is happening? All those things. And honestly, for about, she did it for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then I just started screaming and I just started crying. And I was like, what? And so for me, in that moment, I realized that I was really holding it all together. But when I felt like all the things I knew I could not help her, I really just had to lean into what is it that she needs from me in this moment, and not necessarily what does she need from the world, or what can I give her, or what skill is lacking. And that's when I realized just that me being there in the moment, I teach people how to stay calm in the moment, but for me, that wasn't what it was. But that's what I needed to have that breakthrough, to be able to understand that in this moment, all she needs is me. And so after, I was screaming and crying with her, and then we both stopped because I think at that point I think she realized, oh, this lady might be crazy. Because then she stopped and she looked at me and she was like, what is going on? Like, just the look on her face, but she stopped crying. And so after that, we were able to move through it. And I think it just, that night in that moment, made me realize that the way I was doing trauma work, it was from a place of knowing the skill, building the skill, and it wasn't really from a place of how can we meet them where they are wholly and unapologetically without trying to change them and bring them to where we want them to be. And that was my experience about 3 or 4 months after she was part of our family.
So yeah, you made it a long time. That's really interesting. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the word trauma for a second, because it
Mm-hmm.
is a word that gets used today in a lot of different ways. Probably a better way to say that is that the modern usage of the word is pretty broad now. Where if you
Mm-hmm.
went back 50 years, it would have been very different. It would have had, it has a lot of connotations. When we talk about trauma work, and people throw it around. Um, One of the things that can be a sign of somebody that's going through or experiencing like a very stressful reaction is exactly what you talked about. Like the behavior doesn't match the situation. Like it's an outsized response. Like this is bath time and you have a tantrum. But at the same time, that can just be a tired kid, right? These things are hard to do. In your experience, tell us a little bit about what kind of trauma we're talking about within
Mm-hmm.
the field of adoption and foster care, just in your opinion and your experience.
Oh, the trauma. Honestly, the stories I've heard, the families I've sat with, they are they can be the things that even as adults, I can't imagine these kids have been through this in only 2 or 3 years of living. And it could be trauma in terms of like, of course, the sexual abuse. It could be neglect. It could be children born with drugs in their systems. It can be children being beaten by parents. And I call it corporal punishment, going too far sometimes. It could be children being neglected and not having food or not knowing where the next meal is going to come from. So there is definitely a vast amount of trauma. One of the things that I work with, and in my experience, is we deal with there's the past trauma, but then there's also the present trauma of children who are in foster care. Just the fact that you are not living with your birth family is traumatic,
Yeah.
and so you're having to live with somebody else. And then even that could be kin. It could be like a child being raised by the grandparent. That's
Yeah.
traumatic. Even if the parent is there or not there, and sometimes with the parent being an active part of your life and you're living with your grandma can be traumatic. Because when you go to school, and part of it, in my book, when I write about trauma, one of the things I said is that trauma can look like any and everything and nothing at the same time. And I think that's where it's so vague because it's about how it impacts the other person. Because something can happen to me and I'm like, okay, that wasn't traumatic, but then it could happen to the person sitting right next to me and they're having a hard time dealing with it. And so being able to cope with how it happened and what happened to them. And so one of the things that I work with a lot is just that present day trauma. Now we go deep and we deep dive into the traumatic histories, but the present trauma of I live in a foster home, I'm living with people who are not my people. I'm going to school, everybody's talking about mom and dad. I don't have a mom and dad. Those are the things that the kids that I work with, I see that a lot.
Yeah, so that would be where like the situation itself is intrinsically challenging. Like it's just looking at the fact that being in the foster care system, even if you're talking about
Mm.
kinship guardians or people who are related to you, there's something about it that is so stressful that it's built in. It's built in. It's baked in. Okay, without getting overly personal or anything of that, what are some of the ways that living this experience and being 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, living as a foster parent, what are some of the ways that that impacted how you work with your clients?
I think the biggest shift for me is the fact that I as the adult, um, I'm one of the, if not the most important intervention that they'll ever have. It's not about building skills. It's not about learning how to decrease anger. It's not about learning how to do all the things. It's about, or me teaching them how to do those things. The biggest thing is just me being there, me being present, and me accepting them for who they are unapologetically.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and I keep saying that because in mental health in our field, especially when we think about children with behaviors, the biggest challenge that we have is that we want to change the behavior and we want to move them from a child who's having challenging behaviors, and we kind of want to drag them along to become a different version of themselves. But that's very difficult to do if we don't just accept them for who they are in the moment and what they're dealing with, and saying, okay, what is it that I can do? How can I model the behavior? How can I be there? How can I support as the person, as their person that is going to influence and change their behavior over time? And so a lot of times in the foster system, in the foster care system, and even in mental health, when children are having challenging behaviors, we will sometimes minimize just our impact of just accepting who they are, where they are in the moment.
That is a really, really amazing answer. The thing that I say to people is I'm like, you're trying to separate your thoughts about the behavior from your thoughts about the person and your relationship with the person. And which is, that's just like a one-liner, but that's really hard to do sometimes. It's really, really
Mm-hmm.
hard to do when kids are behaving just like kids. But as adults, when we think about how amazing it is to have an interaction with another person who we think sees us as we really are, the person that you don't have to get dressed up for, the person that when if you open the door and your house is a mess, you're just like, yes, come in. They're not going to think twice.
Mm-hmm.
And we have so many more skills than young kids. And so, to be the safe space or the safe person where you can melt down in the bathtub and you don't feel at risk. It's a really clear idea, but it's also much more complicated, like you said in the moment, than it is. And I always tell people based on, so I have stepkids and I have kids. And
Mm-hmm.
I make a joke. I say, listen, everybody melts down. I don't care what book they've written. I don't care how many speeches they've given. You give me the
Mm-hmm.
person who wrote the book on gentle parenting when she's at Target with 4 kids and you're coming off the flu and everybody's tired and somebody drops a 2-gallon container of milk in the aisle. I don't think she's going to be calm. I'm sorry. I don't think she is. I think we all have our moments.
We do. We definitely all have our moments.
Right. It doesn't matter how many times you study it or how much you've known. And that's why it's one of my soapbox issues where I just will climb up and rant about this is that it's like we really, as adults who are working with kids, and foster care is a unique thing where you actually get training, right? You actually get training and there's courses. You don't know this about me, but I do some mentorship for step parents. You go from being a single person to being a step parent. It's not even nobody, it's just there. You get no guidance whatsoever, like overnight. You have no idea what you're doing. And, so that's this interesting thing. But when we look for people to advise us, if you're not careful, you can be getting advice from people who've written books and they're professional and they've got training, but they maybe never have tried it themselves. And so they mean well, but they're telling you to do things that you're like, this doesn't work. When I do this
Mm-hmm.
in my house, does not happen the way you say it's going to happen. That can be a lonely place to be as an adult. That can be a lonely place to be. So, and I say that with nothing but love for the experts that are out there giving advice. It just can be very different to do things than it is to talk about the tools and the skills. Like you were saying, it's very different to talk about staying calm in the moment and anger
Mm-hmm.
management techniques than it is to try and actually be staying calm in an overflowing bathtub with a screaming kid. Those are two different skill sets.
Yes, they are. And I call that the burning paper moment, because a lot of times you'll have and we've seen it where people will go and they're having this healing moment, and we'll write things down on the paper and then we'll burn it, and when it burns we release it into the atmosphere. And that is a very picturesque moment. But if nobody's taught you the skill to be able to really let it go, that really is just a picture in a good moment. And so that's what happens sometimes when people are experts at things. And I know experts have their place, because before I became a foster parent, I was an expert as well,
Yeah.
because that's the work that I did. I think, but a lot of times the difference with me was with me doing in-home services, in the agency that I worked for, we were there together. So it wasn't like I was teaching them, hey, here's the strategy. And if when it let me know how it works, it was, this is the strategy. I'm going to be here with you so we can go through it together and model it together. And I think that's the part that we're missing sometimes, with somebody just being able to be there, model it, and walk us through the journey, or walk through the journey with us, whatever journey that we're on.
I completely agree. One of the
Mm-hmm.
very first parenting experts that I had, that I went to a conference, a seminar, a book, something at the library. I went to a presentation at the library, insert your kid moment, and a parenting coach who was delightful. I love this person, and she gave me a tool for the kids for the situation I was in, which was to give these young kids a choice and make sure that all the choices were things that I was okay with, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
an excellent tool. It's an excellent tool. Has a limited viability in how long it will work with your kids, in my experience, because they figure it out, right? They figure it
Mm-hmm.
out and they begin to propose their own options. So, or at least my kids did. So I was
Mm-hmm.
like, do you want to go to the bath now or in 2 minutes, right? And after a little while, they were like, I don't want either of those. I want to watch more TV. And I was like, I went back to this person and I was like, hey, so what do I do now? And she was like, no, that's it. It means you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, no, I don't think that that's what that means. I think it means I'm ready for another tool. Right. And, and so, and I also, I'm in a position where people will come to me and say, what's your advice for this? And I think it's a very experienced person who has the wherewithal to say, be present and be like, if I'm not there in the moment, you've got to be able to solve it yourself. So let's work on this in a different skill set. Because yeah, and watching somebody actually do it and go through it, or have somebody with you when you do it, that is the magic sauce. Like, when I see kids and parents in public places and everybody's having a hard time, it's like I have a completely different outlook on it, having been in that situation myself. And I'm going to show up in a different way because, it's like, yeah, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. Show up
Mm-hmm.
to help. All right. So, when you began to take this new shift for how you were going to help your clients with trauma into your work, was it well received by your clients and your peers and the people around you? Or did you get any pushback when you began to talk about a different way of thinking about trauma and working with trauma?
It was not well received. And they were like, "What? You're telling me I have to do something different?" No, I'm here. I'm a foster parent. I love them. They need to just act right.
Yeah.
Or when I would talk to my colleagues in the mental health field, they were like, "Well, parents don't bring their kids to us for us to tell them that they need to do something different." Parents are, we're dropping them off, and I need you to fix the kid, and I'll be back and pay the invoice.
Yeah.
And so it definitely, that is a conversation
That is
that,
so spot on. That is so spot on.
yeah,
To drop you off, this is swimming lessons. By the end, you need to know how to swim. I'll pick you back at the end.
I'll pick you up. And so a lot of times in the community, I think when I am having conversations now, people are like, "Oh, that's a good way to think about it." And then when I'm talking to parents after, because I definitely like to give people's feedback, like, "Hey, I said this thing. When you tried it, how was it?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, I still think that I was as calm as I could be, but I still think when I tell him to do something, he just needs to do it." Right. And so there's definitely this shift, that, eh, honestly, I hate to say has to happen. But we are, as adults, sometimes we are wanting the children to control themselves when we're having a hard time controlling ourselves.
Yeah.
And so being able to recognize that, our job, and I tell parents, one of the things I talk to people about is, ultimately we cannot control a child's behavior. All we can do, we can control our response, and it will influence and impact how they behave. But if you go into a situation thinking you're finna control their behavior, and it's not fear based. Now, fear based, you can control it,
Yeah.
but it's going to be very limited. It's only going to happen for a while, and when they grow older, fear becomes power struggles, and that's a whole nother conversation.
It is. Yeah.
Or not even when they're older, but even in the young age, fear can become power struggles. Um, but if you want something that's lasting and impactful, you are the number one tool in intervention in any crisis situation.
Oh, 100%. I, you totally took my breath away, actually, with that response, because what you described is the awareness that in order to help somebody else regulate, you have to be able to regulate yourself. But the
Ooh.
reality is that most of us don't have any idea when we're dysregulated. Even if you have a lot of experience with it, you sometimes need somebody to say, hey, by the way, I don't know if you can see this about yourself, but you are off the
Mhm.
rails, you know? And that doesn't feel good as an adult to have somebody say, hey, are you a little dysregulated? And then so many times, right? It's like, okay, this would just be better if you were behaving in a different way. But there is that illusion, right? There's that illusion that as adults we are in control of the little people who live around us. False, totally false. Totally false. From day one, we have very limited control,
Mhm.
and that's an unpopular thing to tell adults, isn't it?
It's very unpopular that and part of it too is because if you think about society and the things that we see, whenever there's something that involves a child, they're always asking about the parents. Well, where were the parents and what are the
Yeah.
parents doing? And if something happens traumatic, it's well, let's dig into this child's relationship with their parent and see where the parent went wrong. And so as parents, we take on that responsibility that we are supposed to, that we are supposed to do this, and this because forbid something happens and we're the headline of this child slapped the teacher because the parents weren't active in her life or the parents didn't do this and the parents were trying to be her friend and all the things that come along with it. And so society tells us that we have to control that behavior because if our kids look bad, then we look bad.
It's so true. It's a lot of pressure on adults to carry that, especially because I think it's impossible. Really smart, wonderful adults have kids that are really smart and wonderful, and they also have kids that make dumb decisions and make mistakes
Mm,
and get in big trouble. And sure, sometimes that's influenced by that, but other times it's just a disconnect. Kids do dumb things, and
mhm.
adults do dumb things, and we make bad decisions and all of those things. And a long time ago, I tried to be more gentle with myself and realized that it wasn't really about me. And I do try and extend that to other people. Like it's not a reflection all the time. What adults do is not a reflection on the kids, and what kids do is not a reflection necessarily on their adults. And that's not to say that it's not the greatest gift that an adult can do to give a kid the support and love that they need to be able to grow in a safe environment. That's a tremendous thing that people can do for the kids around them. Okay, so I love that you were honest that your peers were like, what? We don't think so. Okay, in a minute, we're going to do the final fun questions. I want to give you a chance to tell everybody watching and listening what you do in private practice these days and about your book. I know you wrote a book, so tell us all about that and how we can connect and find you online.
Well, right now in private practice, I still I'm still working with children and families. Like I'm still working with families who are, and I call it in crisis, that are dealing with children who are having behavior challenges. One of the things I do differently is when I'm working with the child, it's mandatory to have family sessions. It's mandatory to meet with the parent. In private practice, I kind of get to choose that and say, hey, well, if you don't want to come in and meet with me with just you and I, then I can't no longer see the kid. And I think one of the things is that really most parents want that. Like they're asking for it. And some parents are like, can I get more sessions than the kid gets? Because
Yeah.
they know, that it's something that's needed. And one of the things that I provide an environment for parents to be able to say, you know what, my kid gets on my nerves and
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard. And sometimes I don't know what to do without feeling judged or feel like I'm going to, tell the motherboard at church or that I'm going to call, social services on them. And so I definitely under that space that I do with them. But also I've been doing a lot of speaking and training and traveling. I'm going to different conferences and organizations and being able to train not only the parents, some of the foster parents, but being able to train some of the frontline workers on just that shift and how they can support the foster parents in that shift as well. And so that's one of the things that I've been doing really for the last year since the book came out. And I did write a book, The Heart of the Matter, a compassionate guide to transforming behaviors in foster and adopted children. And in that book, the book is separated into two sections. It's the relationship with self, and it's called Parenting R&R, but relationship with self and relationship with child. Because I think it's important to explore how we got to the point of being parents and why that was important to us and what lessons we brought from our childhood and things that we brought from society as we are learning how to navigate a relationship with our child. the relationship with your child is a thing that's going to keep you out the nursing home. That's what I tell
Yeah,
people.
that is the, yeah.
Right. And the reality is, you just have to, on a very minimal, you just have to like each other. But when you have a child who has challenging behaviors, sometimes, if we're being honest, the school bus coming home is like, oh man, they dropped them off. Or what kind of mood are they going to be in? And so my job is to help them be able to repair that relationship so that you can, look at those baby pictures and are excited about, going to Walmart and going to a baseball game or doing things with your kids. That sometimes when you have a kid who has challenging behavior, you don't get excited about that because it becomes hard work. And so that is my goal and that's my vision and that's what the book is for. And so in the book, I introduced a heart framework, which is an intervention tool. And I see children, I see behavior as communication. And when children are having challenging behaviors, I see it as a crisis. And so when they're in crises, I think the biggest thing is for us to have a way that we can deal with the crisis. Because in the moment of a meltdown, our ultimate goal is to decrease the meltdown. It's not to teach a lesson. It's not
Yeah.
to help them figure out how you got here. In the moment when your child is melting down, the goal is to decrease it. And so that's what the heart framework is. But the anchor of the heart framework is you are the most important intervention tool that they have. And that is the shift that I've been working hard and tirelessly helping adults and in the mental health field as well as parents just understand that you have to be able to focus on you and what you need so that you can better help them see the things that they need.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I will put the link to the book and to your social information in the show notes so that everybody can get it. And the fastest, easiest way for the listeners and the watchers to get that is to be subscribed to the Imperfect Adulting email community, because then I send it directly into your email inbox and you can just click on it. You didn't know this about me before we started, at least, but I do some mentorship for step parents. And one of the wild things about that is that several of the resources that I found in doing my research over the years for myself and for helping other people actually came out of the foster parent resources, because it's a very specialized thing where people are researching and working on tools for a non-biological connection. Because in the family space, people are very quick to be like, hey, this is just because you're not biologically related to that person. And I was like not willing to accept that. I was like, I don't buy that, like, because there are adoptive people out there. And so there are amazing resources on abandonment and creating connection and tools for the adults. And it's an important thing that should be in all kinds of places. So I want your book to go far and wide and help all kinds of people. All right, Megan, are you ready for the final three questions, the fun questions?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. All right. If you had to pick a favorite time of day for yourself, would you say that you love mornings, afternoons, evenings, or late nights?
Probably late nights for myself.
Late nights. All right, there
I'm
you
a,
go. All
I'm a
right.
night owl.
All right. So are you, I did not ask you this. How old are you? Do you mind? Because
40.
40. Okay. So finish this sentence for me. By the time a person is 40 years old, they should definitely know how to do blank. I've stumped her.
How to how to end the conversation they don't want to have.
Ooh, good one. How to end a conversation that you don't want to be in anymore. I love it. All right, very good. All right, so for you, when you today in 2025 want to learn something new, whatever it might be, how to crochet, how to fix it, whatever, right? What is the first place that you find yourself looking for support? Do you go to YouTube? Do you head to the bookstore or the library for a book? Do you head to Google for a good old fashioned Google search? Hit social media, or do you call or text a friend?
I will do a Google search and see if there is a community for it, like there are people doing it, because I feel I do better in community. So if I want to learn how to crochet and Google says that there's a crochet group 30 minutes away, I'm definitely going to join the crochet group.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that answer. I'm super. It's one of the things that is like in my mind right now a lot. It's like, how are people finding stuff these days? Like what? Because some things that used to work don't seem to be working anymore. I just got to admit it. For everything, you want to go for a plumber, looking for a restaurant. It's like I don't know that this works anymore. All right, that's it. Megan Hamm, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself, head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adultier adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting Podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.